Welcome to the Invest with Clarity podcast, where you will learn how success in investing, as in life, is the result of absolute clarity. Mark Pearson of Nepsis in Minneapolis, Minnesota, shares his passion for portfolio management and commitment to transparency and communication to allow investors to fully understand what they own and why, bringing them to clarity in their investments. And now, here are your co-hosts, Matt Halloran and Mark Pearson.
Hello and welcome to another Invest with Clarity podcast. Today, Mark is going to unpack something that is all over the news and has been for a number of years, which is the idea of, should I use a robo-advisor? You know, with the race to the bottom that Mark has talked about when it comes to fees and really value and what you do for your clients, robo-advisors are an objection that financial services professionals have to overcome on a regular basis. But I don't necessarily think they're thinking about it right. And I think what Mark's going to do today is clarify, like he does on all of these podcasts, really how to look at this whole robo situation. So Mark, let's go, brother.
All right. Always good to be with you, Biggie. I'm looking forward to this. This is going to be a great one. We just talked about this actually on my radio show yesterday, had good commentary, in fact, on it. And I think people will be quite happy with it. So I'm going to start this podcast with a question. And with the question, I'm going to answer it, obviously, throughout the podcast as we talk about, should I use a robo-advisor? So before I ask the question, let me tell you the source of the information that I'm going to be taking a lot from today comes from a Minneapolis Star and Tribune article from April 7th of this year, Sunday's paper in the business section. And it was titled, Robo-advisors Are Your Friend. And I didn't know that a computer could be your friend, literally. But we're gonna unpack that. So let me start with the rhetorical question, which I think is an important question. As you know, Nepsis is all about clarity, right? Know what you own, why you own it. And that is, cannot knowing what you own in your portfolio affect your portfolio performance? Cannot knowing what you own affect your portfolio performance? Now, of course, investing with clarity would state absolutely. Because remember, Matt, most people don't really understand how they achieve the performance they do in their portfolio.
Right.
They just trust the process that they're using, and a lot of times they don't even know what that process is. And so in an industry where money moves around a lot from either one advisor to the next, or more importantly, from one portfolio manager to the next, right? This has, in my opinion, been one of the predetermined factors that have allowed the robo-advising business to grow. Okay. So first and foremost, let me begin by saying that the title of this thing, Robo-advisors Are Your Friend, they're not to be confused with financial planners. But when it comes to investment picks, Matt, a computer could be your best option. Can you imagine if every business owner out there who invested in a business or businesses used a computer to rely on whether or not they should make an investment decision? Doesn't that just seem a bit odd, a bit counterintuitive to how a successful business is run?
I've never heard of a successful business running that way.
I have not either. So apparently this article goes on to say that that's, pretty much the deal. Now, the question is, for definition purposes, in case those don't know, what is a robo-advisor in the first place? And this comes from Investopedia.
Okay.
A robo-advisor robo-advisors are digital platforms that provide automated, algorithm-driven financial planning services with little to no human supervision. A typical robo-advisor collects information from clients about their financial situation, future goals through an online survey, and then uses the data to offer advice and or automatically invest clients' assets. So the computer goes and invests the assets. Now, the question I really want to ask here is, you work super hard for your money, right?
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Do you really want your investments chosen by a computer, right? So there's another definition. Robo-advisors are a class of financial advisors that provide financial advice or investment management online with moderate to minimal human intervention. They provide digital financial advice based on mathematical rules or algorithms. So one of the things that's happening in our industry, we've talked about this before, is this whole idea of program trading. Program trading is computers doing all the buying and selling of investments. You may have remembered the flash crashes. We've had two crashes.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is from computer-generated trading. Now, is your money involved in that if you're using a robo? How do you know if it is or it isn't? And what are the potential ramifications of that? This is another layer of a lack of clarity. Now, why are people using robos? So this article goes on to give a couple reasons why you use a robo. Number one, and of course, because everybody wants their financial advice cheap, right? Because it's not that important. Let's just make it a commodity. And in fact, we're going to talk about that aspect of this here in a minute. It says Robo-advisors, also known as automated financial advisors, use computer algorithms to invest your money and rebalance the portfolios needed to meet your goals. This comes from the article. Robos typically use ultra-low cost exchange-traded funds and charge annual management fees of about 0.25% for an all-in cost that can land under 0.5. So in other words, there's a 0.5% cost of the fund and there's a 0.5% cost of using the robo. Contrast that with traditional investment costs, Matt, which can be 1% or even more on top of the annual management fees. It's not unusual for investors to pay 2% or more annually once all costs are considered. Now, this article then goes in and breaks down and says, well, if you average 7% a year, and you paid 0.5% versus 2%, this thing goes on to tell you how much more money you would have. I think that's completely misleading. It says, let's say you invest $10,000, the market returns average 7% over the next 30 years. If you lose 2% to fees, your investment would grow to about $45,000. But if your fees are just 0.5, your investment could reach $70,000. Now, I've invested money for clients for 25 years. I don't know that there's one situation where I've had a client portfolio where there were not factors involved like required minimum distributions for IRAs, money being taken out to pay taxes, money being taken out to pay for this or that, people losing their jobs, needing money. In other words, the statistical probability that someone's going to put their money into something for 30 years and just leave it is a fallacy.
Well, and you've said many, many times on the podcast before, how long people stay in investments. But I want you to put on the brakes. Pump the brakes for a second here, because I want to back up.
Yeah.
So those people who are using these index funds or mutual funds, they already have a robo-advisor, because Morgan Stanley, all of those, probably shouldn't have said that, but all of those big companies on Wall Street, they're looking at algorithmic changes that take microseconds faster than other trading companies in order to eke out a little bit larger of a margin. So even if you are not using a robo, like, online, blah, 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 you're still getting your stocks traded by an algorithm, aren't you?
In a lot of cases, that's a good point. There is a lot of companies out there that their whole job was to build a computer platform that could be quicker and execute on trades quicker than anyone else, the millisecond, if you will, to making that decision. That to me is not investing. That's trading. To me, that's gambling. That's using factors that a lot of people aren't familiar with called technicals. A lot of these robos use technical indicators for making the decisions on buying or selling something. That's a lot of these algorithms are built on. MACD is probably the most common. And this is how investment decisions are being made when the fact of the matter is you're invested in businesses. We haven't even gotten to the whole point of What about the behavioral aspect of investing? Robos take zero consideration for the human factor, which means my life has changed. I've had situations change. The emotional predisposition of the investor and the inability for the investor to really know what's going on with their money. And I'm just saying, hey, it's great that it's 50 bips,
Mm-hmm.
0.5% all in. But to say over 30 years, you'd have 70,000 instead of 45,000, averaging 7%. That takes into zero consideration how much risk was taken to get that 7%.
Yep.
How much risk is a robo platform taking to get you your returns? Don't you think that's an important question to ask listeners?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, we are commoditizing the industry, which gets down to this next point I want to make. Another reason this article stated why you want to use a robo. Robo-advisors aren't conflicted. Robo-advisors won't put you in an investment that costs more or performs worse than available alternatives because they'll earn a higher commission or a fee trip to Aruba. This still happens all too often with human advisors. U.S. regulators have so far resisted calls to impose a universal fiduciary standard, which could require financial advisors to put their clients' interests ahead of their own. Okay, now, so this is another blanket statement, right? And the fact of the matter is that there are a lot of fiduciaries out there. This gets back to a podcast we did a while back, I think, on suitability versus fiduciary.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And we here at Nepsis are a fiduciary, which basically means we are in the same position as a robo-advisor. Client's best interest first. We don't sell commissionable investment products to you and get commissions and get trips to Aruba. Boy, it sure would be nice, but that's not necessarily in the client's best interest. We actually think the lowest cost of investing, cost. Notice I say cost, not fee, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. Lowest cost of form of investing is investing directly right into a company, not into a mutual fund, not into ETFs, not into alternative investments, but directly into a company. Now, you may pay a fee, like you do here at Nepsis, for the advice that has been given to invest in those companies, right? But the bottom line is we're acting as a fiduciary. We believe that every business that's owned in our client's portfolio is part of an overall fiduciary process that is going to allow them to hopefully achieve their financial goals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a huge push. So let me take a step back. There's a huge push for robo-advisors. There's a huge push for passive investing versus active investing. And we're going to do I think we'll do our next podcast on active versus passive investing. The fact of the matter is that investing is not as black and white and is not as linear as this article states or as the industry likes to put out. Investing is not about do I beat an index or not. Investing is more about how much risk do I take to get the actual returns I get on my portfolio, and the combination of not only the empirical data, mathematical data, but also the behavioral data. The art and science is part of investing. This is how great businesses are successful. There is art and there is science. There is a human element that allows that to happen. Look at Warren Buffett. Look at a lot of the very successful money managers. Now, not everybody's a successful money manager. This is where the homework comes in to find those managers and believe in their process. What has made them successful? How were they successful? Can you answer that question to your advisor when he's putting you into certain mutual funds or exchange-traded funds? And so, Matt, the debate comes down to still, I think the core debate is people are moving to robo-advisors because they're not seeing the value add they are getting from a financial advisor and paying that financial advisor.
All right. So if I use a robo-advisor, I'm going to personalize this for a minute because I'm a lot like your listeners, right? So I'm a person who does, invest, I have a retirement plan, blah, blah, blah. But one of the values that I have placed in my advisor is they are a voice of reason. Right. So if I am on that Dalbar sort of, study and, how we do all the wrong things, which we've talked about so many times, if I have a robo-advisor, the robo's not going to tell me no. The robo's not going to say, dude, what are you doing? The robo's just going to do what a robot does, which is obey, right? I want a Mark Pearson. I want your investment committee to come back to me and say, you're doing something that's dumb. You're not thinking about this with clarity.
Yep.
right? What about that? I mean, that you got to be able to put a value on that protection, shouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. In fact, the article does address that, and it does say, what a financial advisor, what one of the values of a financial advisor is the ability to lead you and talk you off the ledge during periods of a downturn, and helping you not make those bad investment decisions. And the deal is, you don't know the future. None of us know the future. None of us know what life events are going to put us in a position where we at some point see a market correction and we sell a bunch of our investments because we have a different thing happen in our life and no one's there to help tuck us off the ledge and stick to the knitting. That is precise. And that's, of course, not everybody does that. I mean, a lot of people just stick to the process because they believe in the process, but there are some who are emotional about that process, and it ends up hurting them. Case in point, we talked about the December $20 billion coming out, and now we're talking about in April, with the markets up huge, how much money is still sitting in cash and how much people missed out on a lot of gains in January into February.
Yeah.
Those are big numbers, and that completely skews the whole basis of the idea of using a robo, because it's using no human element. Now, the irony of that is, of course, Robo's figured out, we need to have financial advisors on board to help in case people want to have a financial advisor.
Okay.
So now the Robos are providing the opportunity potentially to use an advisor. Of course, you have to pay more now, in that case. And now you can have the Robo investing with a financial advisor. In other words, commoditized investing. In fact, this article goes on and says, but most investment management is a commodity. While good, individualized, comprehensive financial planning advice can be priceless, let me say that again. While good, individualized, comprehensive financial planning advice can be priceless and can't be replicated by a computer. So in other words, it makes sense, to pay a premium for quality financial advice that a robot can't offer. Now, it doesn't make any sense, of course, to pay a premium for a service that a robot can do better. Okay, now, here's where I get back to what I said earlier. The problem with our industry is that we're commoditizing it. This article says it perfectly. Investment management is becoming a commodity. Now, let me circle all the way back. Let me tie this all together for you, Uncle Matt. Remember, we talked about our stress test. The stress test is our proprietary process we have created to help dig deep into an investor's portfolio and to help them really understand what they own in their portfolio and where potential risks may lie in their portfolio. Okay? And when you look at these portfolios, when you do the stress test, it turns out that people own hundreds, if not thousands, of stocks in their portfolio. And most portfolios are under asset allocated. Every single stress test I've done, the portfolios have been inappropriately asset allocated. Now, I didn't say diversify, because remember, diversification and asset allocation are different, as we've talked about in other podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
But the stress test shows that people own thousands of stocks in their portfolio. And in my opinion, that is not investing. That is what they call closet indexing. And the industry is telling you it is closet indexing, that people have all these mutual funds in their portfolio. You might as well, and most of these fund managers, quote unquote, don't beat the market, quote unquote. You're better off owning just a cheap index and let the index portfolio do it for you. And by the way, you might as well do it cheap as possible, because what's the value the advisor is giving you on the investment part? This is separate than financial planning. There's lots of value in working with a planner and getting the planning done. But what level of advice, what level of value are you getting for your portfolio management? And every good manager has good years and bad years. But this is why we believe at Nepsis the foundational component of investing with clarity becomes the foundation of helping advisors lead their clients, which means differentiate themselves and provide a higher level of value that they're going to get in most other places, because we can dive directly into what exactly is owned, why it is owned, where the potential risks are, and most importantly, how it coincides with a financial plan to help them accomplish their goals. How was that?
Eloquent as always.
Not bad for a guy with a cold.
Yeah, you've really you've done pretty well with this with the crud that you have going on. You haven't like sniffled or coughed or anything. You know, everybody who's listening to this, you have to be impressed with Mark Pearson's professionalism. Before the podcast today, he's like, dude, I don't feel good. I'm like, come on, man, you can do it. He's like, I can do this. So, you know, he drank his Diet Coke and he just killed it. That was freaking awesome. And you know what? It's so frustrating to me as a person who hasn't worked in this industry as long as you have, but hearing a journalist or a writer or a reporter even say that it's a commodity. I mean, okay, yep. We might have talked about this long time ago, but I'm going to bring this up again to kind of wrap up my part of the podcast and then in the closing thoughts, obviously. But, you know, if you go on WebMD, right, which is one of my favorite sites to go on because every symptom I have is cancer, right? So it doesn't matter if I have the sniffles or if my back hurts or whatever, I have cancer, I'm going to die. When you don't have that human element, the nepsis clarity, the ability to talk to a human being to talk you off that ledge and say, no, that's really not the case. Robots are going to make black and white yes or no decisions. Life is not that, right?
Bingo. And you're right. And to some degree, people are finding that financial advisors are becoming a commodity. I mean, I often say to advisors, what's the value you can provide your client? A lot of them will go directly to their investment process, how they pick the portfolio allocation for their clients. And they kind of go deep into the weeds. And I sit and I don't even understand half of what they're saying. If I'm not understanding it, how can the client understand it? But it sounds good, right? And so people are sitting there going, I can get on this computer and it will tell me how much money I need to retire. It'll tell me how much I need to save for college. It will tell me these basic things, but you just nailed it. Life has challenges. Life has things happen that you are out of your control. And I have a very simple belief. You work really hard for your money. Don't you want every possible advantage and flexibility available to you to bob and weave through life's changes as it pertains to your money so that you can maximize your income, minimize your taxes, and take advantage of financial opportunities? I would certainly hope so.
Amen, brother. Mark, thanks for your brain again, dude.
My pleasure. Always good to be with you, boss.
All right. If you didn't have to subscribe to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe now button below. That way, every time Mark comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. And if you know somebody who needs to get slapped around a little bit and realize that a robo-advisor is quite a poor choice and that you should truly be investing with clarity, make sure you click that share button. And that way you can share this podcast with all of your friends, family, and other business owners. So for everybody at Nepsis and Mark Pearson, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
The content discussed is for informational purposes only. It is not a solicitation or recommendation for any securities that may be mentioned herein. Advisory services offered through Nepsis Inc., an SEC-registered investment advisor.